year later with our second episode of Marriage Hacks.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about this. You know, the reality is this last year has been really heavy for us, and we just didn't have the energy or strength, frankly, to carry the weight of creating content around what we were going through. We created this Marriage Hacks video originally last January, last December, and then it led to this period of time where we started to unpack stuff in our relationship and in our individual lives that was really hard. You know, what's funny is the very first and only time that we've actually spoken publicly around anything marriage related was about 3 days after we discovered that I have had a deep, dark level of anger in my world for a long time. 3 days after we unpacked that, sitting on our back patio, we go into a room and we start talking at a marriage mastermind. And we went in as raw as possible. And we're basically like, we are as perfect as every imperfect couple that ever exists. And all we can do is come in here as raw as possible to tell you what's actually going on. Not as a hack, like this is going to save your world, but as a, hey, we'll let you know. And it's been a heavy year.
It's been a heavy year, but I feel like the first half was working on our relationship, and we still are. But the second half was definitely learning how to work together on our business. So that's actually what we're going to touch on today, and you will hear more about our journey through the personal parts of our marriage that, you know, Brian referring to as we continue with this series. I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of us, so lucky you or not. But yeah, today I want to talk about our experience and kind of like our journey being partners in more than just our marriage, because this has been the first time that we've had the opportunity to do that, and it's come with its fair share of ups and downs, and it's a work in progress. Obviously our experience is ours only, and we can only hope that, you know, as you hear it, something feels familiar and maybe you can relate to some of what we're talking about. But I think the best place to start is always the beginning. And I want to say right around August of last year, I felt like I had the time and the mental capacity to start involving myself more in like the day-to-day, and the way like the cookie crumbled, Brian needed like immediate help and support. And as far as like, I don't know, scheduling, billing, booking,
like everything.
processes, kind of like the whole inner workings of the company. So I slowly kind of worked my way in, and I found this like new joy that I was able to get from working with my husband. It closed a lot of like gaps in our day-to-day experiences that had created friction in the past. For instance, me being a stay-at-home mom, sometimes like Brian, it felt like he was living in this like cool special world, and I loved hearing about it, but it also could be very isolating sometimes because I wasn't a part of it. And so it was like all these things were happening to him outside of our house, but I didn't get to actually feel and experience them. So even though I could be his partner in our marriage and supportive of the things that he would tell me, it's not the same as being able to be right there, like real time involved and, you know, connecting and experiencing things together. So that was probably like one of the most beautiful things that I got out of like the very beginning.
Yeah, and after almost 15 years of being an entrepreneur, post-college, post-corporate world, it was one of the first times that she had any interest or expressed any interest in being involved in any of it either. And so for me, that was like really, really exciting. And I would tell you that I didn't really have any fear or any hesitation around it, other than what impact it could have in our relationship. Because that is the most important thing to me, is for Ashley to be my partner, my wife, my lover, my confidant, my best friend, the mother of my children. And so it was really exciting. And I'll tell you that like the immediate impact of her in the business was felt. You know, one of the first questions that she asked me was, she's like, so are you in your business and what you need from your team pretty much like how you operate in every area of your life? And I laughed and I was like, well, I'm not really sure where this is going, but what do you mean by that? And she said, like, you have an idea, you have a direction, you care about it being directionally accurate, but you really don't care how it gets done. Like, as long as it gets done, you don't need to know how or any of the details behind it. And I said, yep, that sounds about right. And then she said, okay, so if there's inefficiencies or there's things that we're doing that don't make any sense or are not really moving forward in the way that I know as your partner and wife you would want things done, does that mean that I've got the opportunity to flip it on its head? And my immediate answer was like, yes, please, like, please come in, right? Like, come in and flip it on its head. And so the initial role that she was supporting me in, for lack of a better term, was kind of an admin role. And I think it worked really well for a while. And it was because that was what was needed. As an entrepreneur, this period of time was the first period of time that I didn't feel like I was the only one carrying the weight. You know, I have business partners in other businesses. I have in many different respects in different categories. But for the very first time, I was like, I've got a partner in life. Like, it's more than just at home and personal, it's at work, and it was exciting me. And, you know, I've carried shame in my own world because I get 100% credit publicly for what's only 50% mine. And so I've said for a long time to Ashley that I've wanted her to have some role in what we're doing in creating impact in the world, on our mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. Like, it's not a small feat. And although we have phenomenal people around us, like, Ashley's my person. And so her being involved, like, gave me a lot of protection, a lot of safety, and it actually freed me up and opened me up to actually see even greater what was possible with how we could combine our efforts. And it was also great because she knows how I think, she knows how I speak, she knows how I communicate. And so truly, it was the first time that I had someone supporting me directly that I didn't have to, like, educate, learn, teach, on my side learning them, or vice versa. Like, she came in and just hit the ground running and was kicking ass. And she's continued to kick ass a whole long time. But tons of excitement, tons of energy, and then more time passed.
Life happened. So without going into boring detail, we still have kids, and we were fortunate enough to be able to bring, like, our most amazing angel back into our life to help us with some of that balance after I started working more in the business. But my priorities, like, as a mom, will always come first, no matter what. And we are blessed to be able to set our lives up in a way that accommodates that for me and for the family. And I see it as a privilege because I understand that not everyone has that option. But along with that comes, you know, school breaks and field trips and sick days for the kids and all these other things that complicate life. And because it was important to me to, you know, really fulfill that role first, that meant that there were times that I felt like I was constantly behind in the business and that I wasn't supporting Brian to the best of my ability. And it's really hard sometimes to go back and forth with your attention. It's like you're working on a project, then you gotta go do school pickup, and then, you know, there's no time at the end of the day for just doing the things that make you feel like you. And so this entire year has been a year of exploration so far for me, and this continued theme of figuring out who Ashley is and what that looks like and who I want to be moving forward. And Brian's been a huge support in all of that and has been my biggest champion. But there came a time for me when like the stress of me feeling like I wasn't supporting him enough started having an impact on the way I viewed myself as his partner in business and at home. And truly, like, I am my worst critic, like terrible. And that's something that is my primary goal that I'm working on, moving forward. I realize that I feel a lot of shame anytime that I make decisions for myself, or that I feel like I need to ask permission for, everything really. And it's not even permission, and Brian will be the first to say, he doesn't give permission. That's ridiculous. That's completely opposite from how he views our marriage and partnership. But there's something inside of me that is this tiny little voice saying, don't be selfish, don't put yourself first. And all of my previous jobs, I think this is important to note too, have been jobs where I have to do something, I have a task to perform. So, in an admin role, there's very specific duties that have to be fulfilled, and if you're doing a good job or not, because things either get done or not. And I've never had a role, I feel like, in my life where I've been valued for my brain in just my presence or my input or my ability to bring people together, some of those things that are less tangible. And so it has never occurred to me that those skills were skills to be valued, or even skills that could be leveraged in our business. And I know that sounds crazy. I'm the first one to butt in and give Brian advice unsolicited, but I just guess I've never really viewed it as being impactful, which of course he tells me it is. You can't really believe someone when they're saying something that doesn't align with the image of yourself you have, or that doesn't align with the negative self-talk that you are aware exists in your brain. So it got to this point where I started feeling overwhelmed, and I'm like, okay, this isn't the role. I know this isn't the role for me in our business, but what is? And I have very little experience in the entrepreneurial space. So I didn't feel like I could come in and be like, this is what I want to do. And I asked Brian, where do you see me? What do you see me taking over or being responsible for? And what was your response?
Whatever you want.
And how does that sound to someone like me? Terrifying, because I'm thinking something skill-based, something action item-based. What is that gonna look like? And I can't think of anything. So I start feeling like, well, maybe I don't have a place in the business, and maybe that's something that I'm gonna have to be okay with, which totally went against all the joy that I had felt in the beginning, and the pleasure of working with my spouse, and the feeling I get when I'm able to be his true partner, and I feel like my opinions are validated and heard and respected, and I just didn't know how to put that into words. So literally, as recently as last night, we had this huge conversation, and Brian basically opened my eyes to the fact that that can be enough. But I've never valued myself in that way to come up with that first.
It's not only just enough, but that's actually the place that I get most excited. Ashley supporting me from an admin perspective, although it was nice from certain ease of communication, I never viewed that as essential. And I never viewed that as where her value in the business was. I think back, we did an offsite team meeting in the fall, and it was in a period of time where she was just getting involved, but she was a boss. She came in, she handled it, she organized stuff, she led and drove communication, she challenged thought, she expanded on thought, she put structure to it. Truly, she came in and leveraged all of her natural leadership abilities in that environment, and she kicked ass. I didn't have to drive the meeting. Typically in our companies, I'm the one who has to drive. I didn't have to drive because she just showed up and did it. And then she started becoming a part of these team meetings. And all of the females on our team were loving the female leadership energy and how that was balancing the two of us and the way we're communicating and the way we want to create impact. And our team instantaneously felt more empowered. But because of the dynamics of what she just said, there were pieces where she didn't want to let me down. She didn't want to let go of certain roles, even though I was literally like, for any admin roles, we can find people. Now, we have to find good people. I want to find people that have the right energy and thought process. They have to align. Like, to replace what she was doing is not finding just anybody. Not anybody can do it. It is a specific type of person with a specific type of interest and someone who wants to go the extra mile, because the way that we operate to impact over 1 billion lives, the number of businesses that we're running, the number of things that we have on our plate to actually perpetuate this impact and change, we're moving fast. We have a lot going on. It's not something that's like easy to keep up with, and so we need high performers to come in and do it.
You're not easy to keep up with.
Well, I'm just a pain in the ass to deal with is probably more what she means. But the reality of it is it's like, for me, and I didn't do a good enough job of communicating this to her in a way that she could hear it, because I didn't understand that when she asked me where I saw her, I believed that giving her the space to create and self-identify was actually the best way I could support her. And when I said whatever you want, I genuinely meant that, because I don't want her involved in the business unless it's lighting her up. If it's a drain for her, if it's something that's not additive. Yes, this is something that I started, but we started it together. But the reality of it is she doesn't have to be involved unless she wants to be. She can do whatever she wants outside of this house, outside of this business. And so I was thinking that by giving her the freedom to define what her perfect role would look like, that would mean she could live into that. And what we discovered in our conversation last night is that my non-answer actually contributed to her feeling less valuable and less worthy, because I wasn't able to identify the value that I saw her bringing. Outside of content creation and communication, which is not always something that she's like, hey, I want to be a part of. She's just now starting to want to do that, and that's cool, but I don't ever want anything that she does to be because I want her to do it. And so my hesitation, which I felt like was protecting her, giving her a lot of safety so that she could connect with herself and what she wanted, actually was one of the things that was also creating the divide between us. Because in lieu of me giving the structure and the direction and where she's adding value, she's left to her own devices, which is to listen to the same patterns and narratives that have existed her entire life, which is she doesn't have value unless she has a very specific role and skill set. And so as leaders, that is something that we always have to pay attention to. And I mean that as leaders in life and in business and in relationships and in anything. It is up to us sometimes to really take the additional time, energy, and attention to be able to understand what the person communicating with us needs to feel seen and understood and validated. And because I didn't ever really ask what she wanted from me in that answer, I just often were like, well, what do you want to do? Like, you can do whatever you want to do. Like, I think you could be great in content. I think you'd be great while helping women. I think you could be great helping parents with special needs kids. I think anything we do around marriage and relationships and communication, like, that was kind of like how I answered. But it wasn't specific enough. I have the ability to take abstract thought and create a path and a structure, and I don't need direction externally typically to justify that I believe I'm going to go do something. I take for granted sometimes that ability that I have, and how many people need just something to hold on to.
Because if you've never done it before, you've never been your own boss, you are used to being told what to do, and you're used to getting consistent feedback as well. And I am definitely the type of person that needs consistent feedback to feel like I have a pulse on what my performance is like. And I think there's a lot of people like that, but it's just crazy how many things in our life are controlled, including our ability to communicate, by our internal dialogue. And my entire experience was colored by that. And if we hadn't have had this kind of like resetting conversation, Brian wouldn't have really realized the true root of where that insecurity was coming from. And Also, another hugely important aspect of working with your spouse is understanding how they show up in the business. And what I mean by that is when I'm in the kitchen being Ashley, wife and mom, I feel the same emotions and experience things the same exact way that I do when I'm in the office being Ashley, business partner, and slash admin slash whatever I'm being in the moment. But with that, I experience Brian in that same light, like as my husband, not as my business partner. And no matter how hard I tried, I just could not separate those things. I want to be his wife in every moment of the business. And I want him to be my husband in every moment that I'm working with him. But that's not how Brian operates. Brian has this unique ability to really be so business oriented that it's not even that like emotion is taken out of it, because he's a very respectful, like very accommodating person to work with. But he's just not as sensitive with how he like delivers things. Like I need a little more like fluff. I need a little more buttering up, I guess. And I'm also someone who I'm just sensitive, and I'm at a point in my life where I can own that. And instead of like me trying to change, I think like what really needed to happen was this realization that I've now had that like I can be me and experience emotion and have the relationship with my husband that I want in our business. But what I am doing for our business needs to align with who I am, which is a nurturer, a person that wants to bring people together and see success. I want things to be like somewhat structured and organized, and I want more than anything to help Brian. Like I think that what I bring to our relationship, both in business and at home, is something unique that he doesn't get from other people. And I think that we both perform at our peak when we have the right support from each other. And so really the solution to our problem was figuring out like, how do I just get to be myself and not something else, which I've heard a lot of great people talking about recently. No, not at all. But like stop trying to change myself and figure out how I can elevate my partner, because that's what I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, and what we realized is although her in the admin role worked really, really well for a long time, it also got to a place where there was just a lot more overlap in the way we were communicating, and it was bleeding into areas of our life that weren't broken or have been recently fixed or were really feeling well. And to Ashley's point, I think what's interesting for me is the matter-of-fact communication often talks about like getting information and my ability to immediately take it objectively and position it future focused. And so I don't get very emotional in terms of my reactions when things go wrong or not quite as planned, or if something doesn't hit the deadline exactly, or like I just have this belief that things will work out as they're supposed to, as long as we are directionally focused on the areas that matter and we're consistent and show up in so many ways that matter. So for me, failure is not really something that is anything other than deeply embraced in our business. Like I look at mistakes, mishaps, missed deadlines, miscommunication as opportunities for improvement. So just like how I view my world, and we often say that we need to become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories so we can be intentional in how we apply them in our world, like I do that so real time in business that it can seem emotionless, but it's not. Like I'm deeply emotional, and in our business, though I'm not romantic about business, I am deeply emotional in business because it's what connects us. Anybody who knows our content knows that I am a big believer that we have to feel in order to heal. Like, we have to use our emotions as indicators on where we need to be paying attention. Like, where are we creating resistance and energy drain that we need to neutralize or diffuse or make changes or adjust? And we were experiencing it. Both of us were trying to get to the root of it, but for whatever reason, because of the closeness of our relationship and the intimacy and all the roles that we play together, it took us a lot longer to get there than we needed to, than we could have potentially gotten there. Again, because of our emotional triggers and behavioral patterns. And so there were things that were coming across as very neutral or matter of fact for me in business that would come across as either apathy or dismissiveness, or like I didn't
transactional
care. Transactional
is probably, which is common in business.
Which is common in business. And the thing is I'm not justifying that the way I operate is right.
But
it was a
saying it's wrong.
Big divide with how we needed to communicate as partners in life, because there would be things that from an admin perspective that she would be supporting me on that we would talk about. And she talked about she doesn't like failure. She puts a lot of guilt on herself. She's very hard whenever she feels like she's letting me or anybody else down. And so these moments that like I don't even feel like I'm applying additional grace to, like, yes, she's my wife, and yes, I'm going to apply a deeper level of grace in this position than I would with anybody else in it. But it also wasn't like I was making exceptions. So there would be things that she would feel like she screwed up, and I would communicate like, okay, what do we do about it now? It was sometimes literally that simplistic, where I'd say, what do we do about it now? Or, okay, got it, so let's do X, Y, and Z. And I'd give direction. And almost every single time we'd be in that type of interaction, one or both of us would get triggered because of a misinterpretation, because of 15 years of patterns in a deep, intimate relationship that were being trickled into business. And so we've had to learn that. We just had a level set meeting with our team actually today, really talking about the shift in intentionality with how Ashley shows up in the business. And I will tell you definitively, watching the room as we were on our virtual meeting, they were all not only excited about it, but were extremely receptive to it. Because when Ashley shows up feeling like she can just be her, the value is immense. Like, we can't even truly measure it, because she comes in and she elevates everybody around her. And so that's the thing that I'm like really happy about, that we were finally able to get to the bottom of, because what was starting to happen is not only was she starting to retreat from elements in the business, but she was also starting to get to a place, and she may still do this, and so by all means, but she was starting to get to a place where she's like, I think I want to get back into the workforce, but I'm not sure this is where I want to do it. I want to go do more volunteering. I want to go work in a role that's going to make me feel fulfilled and connected. All because we weren't able to communicate and connect on the fact that her value is so deep in this business, and all I want her to do is to just be involved. I don't care how. I deeply care how, as it relates to giving her direction, support, and feedback, but I don't care how as it relates to, it doesn't have to be how I define it. It has to be what she makes sense.